The ultimatum commander, Elena Vasquez, stood in the observation deck of Orbital Station Vigilance, watching Earth rotate peacefully below. The blue marble looked so calm tonight. She had served in the Terran Defense Coalition for 20 years, and most of those years had been quiet. Peaceful patrols, routine maintenance, training exercises that everyone knew would never be used for real combat. That peaceful time was about to end. The sensor alerts started screaming across every station in Earth's orbital defense network. Lieutenant James Park turned from his console, his face pale with shock. His hand shook as he pulled up the readings on the main display. The numbers made no sense at first. Massive gravitational distortions were forming at the edge of the solar system. Space itself was bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. Elena moved to the tactical display and watched the readings with growing concern. Whatever was coming, it was huge. The gravitational signatures suggested ships larger than anything humanity had ever built. She opened a direct channel to Earth Defense Command. General Robert Hassan appeared on her screen immediately. Behind him, she could see dozens of officers rushing between stations. Everyone had seen the alerts. Hassan's voice was steady despite the chaos behind him. He told Elena to hold position and prepare for first contact. Every ship, every station, every defense platform was going on full alert. They had prepared for this day, trained for it, but now that it was actually happening, Elena felt a cold weight in her stomach. The alien ships emerged from hyperspace like nightmares materializing from a bad dream. They were enormous, each one dwarfing Earth's largest space stations. Their hulls were dark red metal that seemed to pulse with inner light. Strange symbols covered their surfaces, glowing with an eerie green luminescence. Elena counted them as they appeared. 50 capital ships, each one capable of destroying an entire planet. The fleet arranged itself in a formation that was clearly meant to intimidate. They hung at the edge of Earth's defense perimeter like judges looking down on criminals. Elena watched them through the observation windows and felt small. Humanity's entire space fleet looked like toys compared to these monsters. The communication came on every frequency at once. Every screen in human space showed the same image. The alien that appeared was unlike anything humans had imagined. It stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that looked like polished obsidian. Its eyes were pure silver with no pupils, and when it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. The creature identified itself as Supreme Chancellor Vorgath of the Zitharon Dominion. It spoke in perfect English, which meant they had been watching humanity for some time. Vorgath's words were simple and devastating. The Zitharon Dominion ruled over 5,000 star systems. They had conquered over 300 different species in their expansion across the galaxy. Humanity was now in their path. Vorgath explained the situation with the tone of someone discussing the weather. Earth had 48 hours to surrender unconditionally. All human military forces would be disbanded. All weapons would be turned over to Zitharon control. Humanity would become a client species, serving the Dominion's needs. Those who cooperated would be allowed to live. Those who resisted would be eliminated. The Supreme Chancellor made it clear that this was not a negotiation. There would be no discussion, no compromise. Humanity would submit or humanity would die. The Zitharons had destroyed species that tried to fight back. They would do it again without hesitation. Vorgath ended the transmission with a final warning. The countdown had begun. Use the time wisely. Elena stood frozen, staring at the empty screen where the alien's face had been. Around her, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence. They had always known that first contact might not be friendly, but this was worse than anyone had imagined. These aliens weren't interested in peace or communication. They only wanted submission. Lieutenant Park broke the silence with a question everyone was thinking. What were they going to do? How could Earth fight against something so much more powerful? Elena didn't have an answer, at least not one she could share openly. But she wasn't worried. In fact, she was smiling. A small, cold smile that made her crew nervous. She opened a secure channel, one that required 3 different encryption keys and biometric verification. The channel connected to a location that didn't officially exist. A woman's face appeared on Elena's private screen. Dr. Sarah Chen looked calm, like she had been expecting this call. Behind her, Elena could see a command center that no civilian had ever heard of. Dr. Chen ran an organization called Project Phantom. It existed in the shadows of human government, hidden from even most high-ranking officials. The project had one mission that had driven everything they did for 4 decades. Prepare humanity for hostile first contact. That day had finally arrived. Chen spoke quickly and quietly. Elena needed to make the Zitherons believe humanity was terrified and helpless. Show them the old defense fleet, the outdated ships that the public knew about. Let the aliens scan their weapons and laugh at human technology. Make them confident. Make them arrogant. Meanwhile, Earth would prepare the real response. Elena understood immediately. She had been read into Project Phantom 5 years ago when she reached the rank of commander. She knew the truth that most of humanity didn't. Earth's real military had been built in absolute secrecy. For 40 years, the best minds in human space had been preparing for this exact scenario. The story began decades ago when human deep space probes detected artificial signals from distant star systems. Scientists realized that intelligent alien life existed, and that some of these civilizations were incredibly advanced. The world governments faced a terrible choice. They could announce the discovery and risk causing mass panic, or they could keep it secret and prepare in silence. They chose silence. A small group of leaders created Project Phantom and gave it unlimited black budget funding. Every resource that could be spared without arousing suspicion was funneled into the project. Brilliant scientists disappeared from public life, recruited into secret research facilities. Military officers with the highest potential were quietly transferred to classified assignments. Humanity went dark. Every colony stopped broadcasting into deep space. Every ship learned to mask its signals. Earth became a ghost watching the galaxy from the shadows. They studied alien civilizations without being detected. They learned how different species fought their wars. They analyzed weapons technology and defensive strategies, and while they watched, they built. Hidden shipyards were constructed in the outer solar system, far from any normal traffic routes. Entire asteroid fields were hollowed out and converted into manufacturing facilities. Secret colonies were established on moons that official records claimed were uninhabitable. Thousands of people lived their entire lives in these hidden bases, working on projects they could never tell their families about. The result of 40 years of secret work was the Shadow Fleet, 700 warships that represented the absolute cutting edge of human engineering. These weren't the fusion-powered cruisers that the Zitherons were currently scanning with contempt. These were predators built to hunt in the darkness of space. Elena initiated the public response to the Zitheron ultimatum. She gathered every old warship in the solar system, the destroyers and frigates that protected the trade routes, the patrol ships that maintained order around the colonies, even the old museum pieces that had been kept in service for tradition's sake. They formed a defensive line around Earth. The fleet looked brave. It looked desperate. It looked exactly like what the Zitherons expected from a primitive species facing its doom. Human media broadcast images of the fleet to every corner of Earth. People saw their military preparing for a hopeless last stand. Some panicked, some prayed. Some prepared to fight with whatever weapons they had. The Zitheron scouts flew close to the human ships, scanning their technology with casual arrogance. Their reports went back to Supreme Chancellor Vorgath, and he must have laughed when he read them. Human ships used fusion drives that were centuries behind Zitheron technology. Their weapons were simple kinetic projectiles and low-yield missiles. Their armor was standard alloy plating that Zitheron weapons could pierce like tissue paper. Vorgath sent another message to Earth. His tone was mocking now, almost bored. He called the human fleet pathetic. He wondered why humanity was even bothering to resist. Did they really think those antiques could stand against Zitheron power? He almost sounded disappointed that this wouldn't be more interesting. On Earth, in a bunker buried 5 kilometers beneath the Arctic ice, Dr. Chen stood before a council of 13 people. They were the Shadow Council, the leaders who had guided Project Phantom since its creation. They had made decisions that shaped human destiny without anyone knowing their names. Now they would make the most important decision in human history. The choice was simple in concept, but terrible in its implications. They could reveal the Shadow Fleet and fight back, or they could surrender and hope the Zitherons would be merciful. Everyone in that room knew there was really only one option. Humanity had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. They would not kneel. Captain Marcus Chen sat in the command chair of the TDS Nightfall, flagship of the Shadow Fleet. He was no relation to Dr. Chen, though they shared the same dedication to humanity's survival. Around him, his bridge crew worked in absolute silence. They had trained together for 15 years in the secret colonies. Some of them had never seen Earth with their own eyes. Their whole lives had been classified. Marcus checked the fleet status one final time. 700 ships waited in formation around the nightfall. These vessels were works of art and instruments of war perfected over decades. Their hulls were constructed from metamaterials that bent sensor waves around them, making them nearly invisible. Their weapons used principles that most human scientists didn't know existed. Each ship carried quantum processing cores that could calculate battlefield scenarios faster than any biological brain could follow. Dr. Yuki Tanaka walked onto the bridge of the Nightfall. She looked exhausted, having worked for 72 hours straight making final preparations. Her team had been checking every system on every ship, making sure nothing would fail when the moment came. She gave Marcus a tired smile and a simple nod. Everything was ready. The 48-hour deadline was approaching its end. Earth still hadn't responded to the surrender demand. The Zitherons were growing impatient. Vorgath sent one final transmission. This was humanity's last chance. Surrender immediately or face total annihilation. Every human world would burn. Every colony would be destroyed. Earth itself would be reduced to radioactive ash. Dr. Chen stood in the command center of Project Phantom. Around her, hundreds of people waited at their stations. She thought about all the years of sacrifice, all the secrets kept from billions of people who never knew the danger lurking in the stars, all the brilliant minds who had given their lives to this project without recognition or glory. It all came down to this moment. She picked up the quantum communicator that connected directly to the Shadow Fleet. Her voice was steady and clear when she spoke. Just 3 words that would echo through galactic history. Release the Armada. In the depths of space, far beyond Pluto's orbit, massive stealth fields deactivated. Quantum reactors that had been running in silent mode came to full power. 700 ships that had been invisible suddenly became real. The Shadow Fleet began to move, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Revelation Captain Marcus Chen gave the order that 700 crews had been waiting years to hear. All ships were to activate their quantum displacement drives and jump to Earth's orbital space. The technology had been humanity's greatest secret, developed in hidden laboratories by scientists who had sacrificed normal lives for this moment. Unlike the slow fusion drives the Zitherons had seen on human ships, quantum drives could move vessels across the solar system in seconds. Reality twisted around the Shadow Fleet. Space folded in on itself as the ships slipped between dimensions. The Zitheron sensors detected nothing. Their advanced scanners were looking for conventional propulsion signatures, energy trails, anything that would indicate ship movement. But quantum displacement left no trail. One moment the Shadow Fleet was beyond Pluto. The next moment they materialized in Earth orbit. Supreme Chancellor Vorgath stood in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The massive ship hung at the center of the Zitheron formation, like a dark god watching its subjects. Vorgath was reviewing the final attack plans when his tactical officer suddenly shouted an alert. New contacts were appearing on their sensors, but the readings made absolutely no sense. Ships were materializing out of nowhere. Massive vessels that hadn't been there a microsecond before. They appeared in perfect attack formations, surrounding the Zitheron fleet from every angle. The sensors struggled to maintain locks on them. Their hulls seemed to absorb scanner beams, making accurate counts nearly impossible. But the tactical computers estimated at least 700 vessels. Vorgath stared at the display screens in confusion that quickly turned to anger. Where had these ships come from? How had they appeared without any hyperspace signature? His science officer was frantically running diagnostics, convinced the sensors were malfunctioning, but multiple independent systems all showed the same thing. Earth had a fleet that the Zitherons had never detected. The human ships arranged themselves with mathematical precision. They formed a sphere around the Zitheron formation, cutting off every escape route. Their weapons powered up simultaneously, and the energy readings made Vorgath's tactical officer gasp. Each human vessel was generating power levels comparable to a Zitheron battleship. But that was impossible. The primitive fusion reactors they had scanned couldn't produce that much energy. A transmission came through on Vorgath's command frequency. A human face appeared on his screen. The man looked calm, almost casual, like he was having a normal conversation instead of facing down an empire that had conquered 300 species. This was Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran defense ship Nightfall. Marcus spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried more threat than any scream. He thanked Vorgath for the generous warning. 48 hours had been very kind. It gave humanity enough time to bring their real fleet out of hiding. He hoped the Zitherons had enjoyed their moment of confidence. That moment was ending now. Vorgath tried to respond, to demand explanations, but Marcus cut him off. Humans were not accepting the surrender demand. Instead, they had a counteroffer. The Zitherons could leave Earth's solar system immediately. They would be allowed to retreat with their lives. But if they chose to fight, they would learn a lesson that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity was not prey waiting to be conquered. They were predators who had been preparing for this hunt for 40 years. The Shadow Fleet powered up its weapon systems fully. The space around the ships seemed to darken as they activated gravitational manipulation fields. These weren't the simple kinetic weapons the Zitherons had seen on the old human cruisers. These were weapons that bent the laws of physics, that reached into other dimensions, that could tear apart matter at the quantum level. Vorgath felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. He looked at the tactical display and realized he had made a catastrophic mistake. These humans weren't primitives trying to bluff their way out of disaster. They had been watching, waiting, preparing. They had let the Zitherons see exactly what they wanted them to see while hiding their true strength. The Supreme Chancellor's pride wouldn't let him retreat without testing these humans. He needed to know if this display of power was real or just another elaborate bluff. He ordered a probe squadron forward. 12 small but heavily armed vessels. They would engage the nearest human ships and report on their actual capabilities. Then he would know the truth. The Zitheron probes advanced with their shields at maximum power and weapons charged. They targeted the closest human vessel, a ship that identified itself as the TDS Vengeance. The probes fired their plasma cannons, weapons that could melt through the armor of most known spacecraft. The superheated plasma streaked toward the Vengeance. The human ship didn't try to dodge. It didn't need to. The plasma bolts hit an invisible barrier 200 meters from the hull and simply ceased to exist. The Vengeance had deployed a zero-point energy shield that created a bubble of altered physics around the ship. Any attack entering that bubble was drained of all kinetic and thermal energy, reduced to harmless particles. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Morrison sat in the captain's chair of the Vengeance. She smiled at her weapons officer and gave a simple order. Show them what we can do. The Vengeance fired a single shot from its main cannon. The weapon didn't fire a projectile or an energy beam. Instead, it created a focused gravitational anomaly that traveled at near light speed. The gravitational weapon hit the lead Zitheron probe, and the ship imploded. Its hull crumpled inward like paper being crushed by an invisible hand. The internal gravity increased to thousands of times normal in a fraction of a second. The crew was killed instantly, compressed into a space the size of a basketball. The ship's reactor ruptured and the probe exploded in a flash of blue-white light. The other 11 probes tried to scatter, but they were too slow. The Shadow Fleet had been waiting for this moment. Weapons fire came from a dozen human ships simultaneously. Gravitational weapons, quantum disruptors, antimatter torpedoes, directed energy beams that operated on frequencies the Zitherons had never encountered. In 10 seconds, all 12 probe ships were destroyed. Vorgath watched the tactical display in horror. His probes hadn't stood a chance. They hadn't even scratched the human shields. His weapons officer was shouting reports about energy signatures and weapon types that their database didn't recognize. The humans were using technology that was decades, maybe centuries beyond what the Zitherons possessed. Commander Elena Vasquez watched from orbital station Vigilance as the Shadow Fleet revealed itself. She felt a surge of pride mixed with relief. For 5 years she had kept this secret, knowing that humanity's survival might depend on it. Now the secret was out, and the galaxy would never underestimate Earth again. Supreme Chancellor Vorgath faced a choice. He could retreat and admit that the mighty Zitheron Dominion had been outmatched by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Or he could commit his full fleet to battle and hope that numbers would overcome the humans' technological advantage. His pride made the decision for him. The Dominion had never retreated from any species. They would not start now. Vorgath gave the order for a full assault. All 50 capital ships were to engage the human fleet with maximum firepower. Every weapon, every fighter squadron, everything they had. The Zitherans would overwhelm these humans through sheer force if nothing else. His fleet moved forward in attack formation. Captain Marcus Chen watched the Zitheran fleet advance and felt a moment of sadness. He had hoped they would choose to leave. Humanity didn't want to slaughter these aliens even if they had come to conquer Earth. But the Zitherans had made their choice. Now humanity would have to show the galaxy what happened to empires that threatened Earth. Marcus opened a fleet-wide channel. His orders were simple and direct. Engage at will. Protect Earth, show no mercy. 700 ships responded as one. The Shadow Fleet moved forward to meet the Zitheran assault. The battle began with the Zitherans launching everything they had. Plasma cannons fired thousands of superheated bolts. Missile batteries released swarms of guided warheads. Fighter craft poured out of launch bays like angry insects. Energy beams lanced through space. It was an overwhelming display of firepower that had destroyed entire planetary defense fleets. The human shields absorbed it all. The zero-point energy barriers turned plasma into harmless light. Missiles exploded uselessly against gravitational distortion fields. Fighter craft found their targeting systems scrambled by quantum interference. The Zitheran assault looked impressive but accomplished nothing. Then the Shadow Fleet returned fire. Human weapons hit the Zitheran capital ships with devastating effect. Shields that could withstand gigaton-level impacts collapsed under gravitational weapons that attacked from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Armor plating that had been forged in the cores of dying stars was torn, apart by quantum disruptors that unbound the atomic forces holding matter together. The first Zitheran capital ship exploded 3 minutes into the battle. Its reactor containment failed under the stress of multiple hits, and the antimatter fuel detonated with the force of a small star. The explosion vaporized 2 nearby cruisers and crippled 3 more. The Zitheran formation broke apart as ships tried to avoid the expanding fireball. Aboard the Nightfall, Marcus watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Shadow Fleet was performing exactly as designed. 40 years of preparation, countless simulations, endless training. It was all paying off. The Zitherans were learning that there were predators in the galaxy, more dangerous than their empire. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the battle from her command center deep beneath Earth's surface. Around her, analysts tracked every shot fired, every ship damaged, every tactical decision. They were learning from this fight, gathering data that would help humanity face whatever other threats existed in the galaxy. The Zitherans wouldn't be the last empire to come calling. Lieutenant Kenji Sato piloted his interceptor through the chaos of battle. He was part of Ghost Wing, an elite fighter squadron that had trained in secret for this moment. His ship was small and impossibly fast, equipped with stealth systems that made it nearly invisible even at close range. He and his wingmates hunted Zitheran fighters with ruthless efficiency. Kenji's targeting system locked onto a formation of 6 alien craft. They were searching for human ships, their sensors sweeping space in patterns that were textbook Zitheran tactics. Kenji smiled inside his helmet. He had studied those tactics for years. He knew every formation, every maneuver, every weakness. He attacked from their blind spot. His ship's weapons fired compressed gravitational pulses that caught 3 Zitheran fighters in a cascade effect. Their hulls crumpled like aluminum cans. The survivors scattered, but Ghostwing was already there. 12 human interceptors materialized out of stealth and opened fire. In seconds, the entire alien formation was destroyed. The battle raged for 42 minutes. It felt like hours to those involved. But human computers recorded every second with perfect accuracy. The Shadow Fleet systematically dismantled the Zitheran Armada. Ship after ship exploded or went dark. Their systems overloaded, their crews dead or dying. The aliens tried every tactic they knew, but nothing worked against humanity's prepared defenses. Supreme Chancellor Vorgath stood on his damaged bridge and watched his empire's fleet being destroyed. Explosions lit up the tactical display like fireworks. His officers were shouting damage reports and casualty numbers that grew worse with each passing moment. Half his fleet was gone. The remaining ships were battered and barely functional. He had been so confident. The Zitheran Dominion had seemed invincible, crushing every species that stood against them. But humanity had been different. They had prepared. They had hidden their true strength. They had waited for the perfect moment to strike. Vorgath realized with bitter clarity that the humans had been hunting the Zitherans long before they ever arrived at Earth. A transmission came through on the emergency frequency. Captain Marcus Chen appeared on Vorgath's screen again. The human still looked calm, but now there was steel in his eyes. Marcus spoke clearly so there would be no misunderstanding. The Zitharon fleet was defeated. Their ships were burning. Their crews were dying. It was time to end this. Marcus offered terms. The surviving Zitharon vessels would power down their weapons and retreat from Earth's solar system immediately. They would return to their empire and carry a message. Earth was not defenseless. Humanity would not submit. Any species that came to conquer would face the same fate as the Zitharons. The galaxy had a new power to reckon with. Vorgath wanted to refuse. His pride demanded that he fight to the last ship. But he looked at the tactical display and saw the truth. If this battle continued, every Zitharon vessel would be destroyed. His entire fleet would die and Earth would still stand untouched. He had failed completely. The Supreme Chancellor gave the order to cease fire and withdraw. His surviving ships powered down their weapons and began moving away from Earth. The human fleet watched them go, weapons still charged, ready to finish the battle if the Zitharons changed their minds. But the aliens kept retreating until they reached the edge of the solar system. Then they activated their hyperspace drives and fled. Silence fell across Earth's orbital space. The battle was over. The Shadow Fleet had won. Humanity had faced a galactic empire and emerged victorious. Captain Marcus Chen opened a channel to Dr. Sarah Chen on Earth. He reported mission success with 0 human casualties. The fleet was intact and ready for any follow-up threats. Dr. Chen allowed herself a moment of relief before getting back to work. The victory was important, but it was only the beginning. News of this battle would spread across the galaxy. Some species would be glad to know the Zitharon dominion could be defeated. Others would see humanity as a threat to be eliminated. Earth needed to be ready for whatever came next. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck and watched the Shadow Fleet maintain its defensive position around Earth. The secret was out now. The world knew that their military was far more powerful than anyone had imagined. There would be questions, investigations, probably some anger about the decades of secrecy. But humanity had survived first contact. That was what mattered. On Earth, billions of people watched the news broadcasts showing the alien fleet retreating. They saw images of the Shadow Fleet, humanity's secret protectors finally revealed. The initial shock was giving way to pride. Earth had been threatened by an empire that ruled thousands of worlds, and humanity had sent them running. Captain Marcus Chen remained on the bridge of the Nightfall, knowing his work was far from over. The Shadow Fleet would need to remain on high alert. The Zitharons might return with reinforcements. Other species might decide to test humanity's defenses. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and Earth had just announced its presence in the most dramatic way possible. But for now, Earth was safe. The Black Armada had emerged from the shadows and shown the galaxy that humanity would never surrender. The message was clear to every species watching from distant stars. Earth was protected by warriors who had spent 40 years preparing for this moment. Any empire that came seeking conquest would face the same fate as the Zitharons. The age of humanity hiding in the darkness was over. The age of Earth as a galactic power had begun, and the entire universe would have to adjust to this new reality.